Watch this.
More than 300 bills have been sent to the governor's office for him to sign, and he's done that to almost all of them. We're still waiting to hear about a couple, like the latest library bill. If he does sign it, how would libraries handle it?
We've been around since 1909, and we plan on staying as long as we can.
One local business is grateful for the governor's John Hancock on one bill, the historic liquor distributors bill. It means the Star Merc can keep being your one-stop shop for a shot of your liking.
The trench and the plant cover play an equally important role.
You ever notice the horizontal gashes that line some parts of the Boise Foothills? Some of you have. They're not natural, but they are supposed to help with handling Mother Nature. Well, it is National Library Workers Day, but instead of celebrating such a day, the Idaho portion of that profession is reading the same 3 pages over and over again. House Bill 710 still sits on Governor Brad Little's desk, as far as we know. He'll have to make a decision on the legislation at least by tomorrow. He can either make it a law by signing it, or he can just put his veto stamp on it once again like he did last session. He can also just not do anything with it and let it go into law by itself. In the meantime, Idaho librarians are combing the bill's language and wondering exactly how they can even comply.
It's one of the biggest questions left in the legislative session.
This is about protecting kids from harmful material.
The governor's call to ink library regulations into law, or to veto for a second straight session.
We're telling them to put them in a safe place away from the children.
House Bill 710 wants libraries that provide inappropriate books to kids to face legal repercussions if a complaint isn't properly addressed.
Then you say we have a state issue and we now have to step in and solve it for the whole state, as opposed to it just being a one-off library issue. It's pretty prominent.
A claim contested by the people most impacted in the policy. Molly Noda's in the front of the line.
I can just feel the effects long term.
But processing those emotions,
it can feel so personal.
It isn't the priority when answers are in short supply.
It's a logistical nightmare, especially when there just isn't a problem.
Do you think you can keep the teen center in the middle of the library like that if this were to be
No, I think it would be a liability and we would have to close it. We have to check ID right here, do not pass. I guess it would have to be right here.
Meaning kids are only allowed on the bottom floor.
You just get a shelf and you put the harmful material there.
Simple as that.
It's so simple. It's actually not simple at all.
To resolve a challenged book is to hide that book.
Just put it behind the desk.
And that's what some lawmakers said all session.
This is an option, yeah.
But not one she's excited about in practice.
It's pretty much gonna languish behind a barrier. And that is so what we are against. One person can make a decision for the whole community.
And not just for the past and present.
Anything that we think that
it's for the future too.
Would cause an issue, even if it's an educational resource, we wouldn't buy it.
That's the invisible part of the legislation, a proxy to censorship. The existing shelves,
sorry,
they're just grandfathered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Once the logistics are thought through and another reality is penned, only then will these librarians pen their personal epilogue, a moment to process it for themselves.
I think Idaho librarians are having a pretty check on them. That's what I would say.
Molly said the Idaho Library Association is looking into cameras for their libraries so they can monitor all parts of the library floor at all times, so they can track if or how a book moves in the event that an adult book is unintentionally found in a children's section. They would need answers on how that happened. And here's the current totals we have now. We just got from the governor's office about people for and against this piece of legislation. People for it, 2,700 roughly, against 4,700. That's through email. You look at those phone numbers, about 4,700 for, just over 2,000 against. So, Brian, those numbers still tilting one way when we look at how people feel about this. Yeah, and you get on social media, you see the Idaho Library Association being very vocal about call the governor, tell him what you think. assuming their followers believe the same thing they do, well, other groups that are on the other side of it have caught on. They've been very vocal as well, getting people to get in the governor's ear before he makes a decision.
That last thing you said about cameras, that brings to mind there was this push long ago when people were worried about certain books being flagged that if you check it out, you're going to go on a government watch list.
Really?
This tells me that, okay, so then now you're going to have cameras watching what you do inside a library to see where you move, that kind of stuff. Might give some people some pause as well.
Yeah.
And just so I understand this, it's not just for librarians. Like, what the whole bill is supposed to do is that if somebody has a problem, they bring it to the librarian and say, please get this out of this children's section, whatever, then they have 60 days to do so or face a $250 fine.
Yeah.
But what she's saying is, it keeps them from wanting to put those possible problem books on the shelves in the first place.
Well, it's if you make it available. So let's say it's not in the teen section, it's in an adult section. But I have to walk past that adult section to get to the teen section. I walk by, I see it, I grab it, I look at it. The library made that available to me. That could be a problem.
Wow. All right. Well, again, still waiting to see what happens. Thank you very much, Andrew. Again, so we're still waiting to hear if Governor Little is going to sign or veto that library bill. But we did learn he has signed 2 other controversial bills into law, both of which impact the LGBTQ community here in Idaho. Yesterday morning, Governor Little signed House Bill 538, the Compelled Speech Pronoun Bill, which prevents public employees from being forced to use the preferred pronouns of colleagues. The statement of purpose from bill sponsors Representative Ted Hill and Senator Chris Trakel says Idahoans have a First Amendment right to refer to someone by their biological sex, even if that is considered harassment to many. House Bill 421 was signed this morning, according to Planned Parenthood. This is the gender sex bill, the one that wanted to make those 2 words synonymous in all Idaho code, declaring they are the same thing. And it declares, this bill also declares there are only 2 genders. Neither one of those claims is backed by any science, social, or biological evidence. So here's what Planned Parenthood's state director had to say about this. Governor Little should be ashamed of ending this session by signing highly controversial and harmful bills that target LGBTQ+ Idahoans. People from every corner of the state showed up at every possible opportunity to warn about the impacts of 421 and 538, and to respond by completely ignoring valid concerns is callous and cruel. She went on to say our state needs more kindness, compassion, understanding, not permission to discriminate against others. Both laws will go into effect on July 1st of this year.
To give you an idea, it's not just Star. It'll be cities like Middleton, Emmett. There's many others that as the population grows, the state comes in.
They help out the little guys, and then when we get big enough, they shut it right down.
Well, that won't be happening anymore, apparently. Star Merc, one of those stores, well, they've been thrown a lifeline after Governor Little signed House Bill 570 into law yesterday morning. As you probably know, if you want to buy a fifth of booze in Idaho, you have to go forth into a state-run liquor store, unless you're in a small town, and in that case, those duties are dealt to a local business. And they're called special distributors, something the Star Merc has been doing for decades. But if a state-run liquor store opens nearby, well, then those smaller businesses lose that special distributor status, and they have to stop selling liquor. We spoke to the owners of the Star Merc months ago, and they told us they were on the verge of losing a major source of revenue. But with this now becoming law immediately, Star Merc can keep their license. Nathan Day, the Star Merc manager, says the new law means a lot to small businesses like them. He said their liquor sales, they have gone down since the state-run store opened down the street, partly because customers thought, well, they weren't selling liquor anymore. But with this new law, they're actually going to expand their inventory.
So our plans were originally, if we were not able to keep the liquor, we were going to expand on more beers and mixers and IPAs. We'll still do that, but now we can incorporate it with the liquor that we have so that we can fulfill all the needs of our customers.
They're going to continue to be open, ready for business. Day says they have been open, doing this since 1909, as you heard, and they plan to stay open as long as they can. An 18-year-old in North Idaho was arrested for supporting ISIS after law enforcement searched his family's home and found items they say were consistent with a planned attack on North Idaho churches. Jude Binkley has details on that and more in today's 411.
An FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force investigation arrested a North Idaho teenager accused of planning to kill churchgoers in the name of ISIS. 18-year-old Alexander Mercurio of Coeur d'Alene was arrested early Saturday, just a day before prosecutors say the teen planned to attack multiple local churches with weapons including knives and firearms. The timing would have coincided with the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Mercurio is now charged with attempting to support ISIS's mission of terror and violence and faces up to 20 years in federal prison if convicted. An initial appearance in court is scheduled for tomorrow. An Air Canada plane made an emergency landing at the Boise airport today after a passenger said they smelled smoke. The plane was coming from Mexico City and headed to Vancouver. Fire officials are inspecting the aircraft for potential hazards. Boise airport staff are assisting passengers, and thankfully the plane landed safely and no one was hurt. All runways remain open.
And we've realized that need to catch up, create the learning spaces that match all 121 programs here.
The College of Western Idaho's Nampa campus is getting bigger. Right now, the campus is only one main building, but the expansion is adding a health and science building and horticulture and agriculture building, which should be done in the summer of 2025, and a student learning hub, which should be done in the summer of 2026.
And it's Owyhee County's only parking meter.
And look how much it is, 10 pennies or 2 nickels.
And those coins were counted for the year. According to the Owyhee County Historical Museum, Murphy's mysterious parking meter pulled in a whopping $6. That's $2 short of 2022's total of $8.09. Director of the Owyhee Historical Museum, Eric Sgarsvo, says the payout is all in pennies and nickels and a few dimes. The loose change is considered a donation to the museum. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Jude Binkley.
They're the beautiful backdrop of Boise, but over the years they've been scarred by fires, floods, and bulldozers. We'll explain. You have any lingering questions you've been wanting to ask us? Maybe something about today's show or maybe for a future show. Text those questions to the number on your screen, 208-321-5614. We'll even take comments on today's show, but don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. All right, one of the best things about the 208, the show, and the state is the back and forth we have with our viewers. Text messages, emails, social media posts, they all have the potential to either further a topic or introduce us to another one. 2 weeks ago, we got this email from Tony, who thought it would be a good 208 story. He said, I moved to Boise from Eastern Washington 33 years ago, and that's when I first noticed the horizontal lines cut into some of the foothills behind the city. There was no internet back in 1991 to research these trenches. Never even asked anyone about it, but I assumed it had something to do with flooding. After years of not knowing, a recent online search proved my hunch was right regarding flooding and an event that happened almost 65 years ago. Tony's right. Back in 1959, the month of August was an eventful one in the City of Trees, actually because of what happened above it. Back then, the foothills were just used for kind of grazing, not necessarily housing. So it was just kind of covered with invasive cheatgrass, not those invasive Californians. But there were two events that occurred within 3 weeks of each other that changed the landscape of and the approach to the Boise foothills.
Boise, Idaho, about noon, August 3rd. The weather was hot. A man-caused range fire was burning northeast of the city.
They called it the Lucky Peak Fire. and crews fought it for about 12 hours before putting it out.
just above Boise.
The damage done, though, was nothing like what hit 17 days later,
Black bare slopes
when thunderstorms unloaded directly over the charred foothills. A 50-year event, they called it, with more than an inch of rain soaking the burn scar. A third of an inch fell in just 5 minutes.
The flood brought destruction to Boise's eastern residential section and business district.
Mud and debris 10 inches deep filled yards, basements, and businesses in East Boise, burying Reserve Street, East Jefferson, East State, and Warm Springs Avenue.
Never in the community's history had there been a flood such as the Big Mud Bath of 1959.
To prevent that from happening again, the newly created Boise Front Watershed Restoration Project would dig trenches that October to catch any heavy rains.
Several passes with the tractor are necessary to complete the trench.
The plan worked, but their worry was revived when more than 30 years later, another human-caused foothills fire scarred 250 acres above 8th Street Extension in 1992. 4 years later, the bulldozers would be back at work.
Here's a little sample of how the trenches will look on 800 to 1,000 acres of foothills land. It looks as drastic as it is, a man-made scar carved into the hillside. But it's an important part of saving Boise from disaster. Crews are already working with hundreds of straw wattles. Helicopters are dropping straw bales for check dams, all to slow a tide of water that could come with just the right storm.
It's in this area where the track hoe is actually going to be doing its job, the area further up the foothills, where the fire burned hot and where the soil is loose.
The trenches seem radical, but this piece of equipment could help reduce the effects. Many excavators will keep the trenches as narrow as possible.
We've reduced that to maybe a 6-foot impact area that tractor will run on, with the actual trench itself probably only being no more than 2.5 to 3 feet wide.
Compare that with the job this old bulldozer did years ago. The trenches above East Boise are 12 to 15 feet wide and remain to this day. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder. One man's scar, in this case, could be a lifeline if it saves Boise from a flood. Richard Pyatt, News Center 7.
Well, that 59 flood caused an estimated $500,000 in damages to the eastern part of town. So the question was, did the trenches work? Well, for the most part, yes. In the decades following that cloudburst flood, as they called it, or the Big Mud Bath in 1959, flooding in and around the foothills was minimal. However, a year after that story from the 1990s, on September 11th, 1997, a cloudburst dropped nearly half an inch of rain in just 9 minutes on that 1996 burn scar. It flooded homes in the Crane Creek and Holes Gulch area and in Highlands Elementary, causing about $57,000 in damages.
have some incredible photographers in our area, don't we? That was such a great capture yesterday. Amazing day to watch that solar eclipse happen. And today we have less going on in the skies, and that's a good thing because that means more sunshine, and fair weather clouds are on the way for the next few days. We're in the middle of a warming trend that will continue to ramp up as we go towards the end of the week. However, as we get closer to Friday, a cold front is expected to bring showers and thunderstorms, and then we can talk more about cooling temperatures after that, but that's a ways out, about a week from now. And so with the drier conditions, we still have a flood warning that's in place for the Owyhee River below the Owyhee Dam. It is expected to reach the flood stage below the moderate flood stage, which it's at now, by Friday. So just keep that in mind if you're in that area or if you know anyone in that area. Again, today, very much on the pleasant side, in the 60s across valley locations, even into the mid 40s for some of the mountains, and even close to 60 degrees over in Haley, while the Magic Valley is in those low 60s. Tomorrow, more pleasant weather is on the way for us, with the highs once again in the 60s, and not a whole lot of wind tomorrow, but that will change as we go into Thursday. The temperatures will be ramping up, but so will the wind at the same time. So for Magic Valley areas, you're looking at the high 50s to mid 60s, and even the mountains getting in on some of the 60s in some spots. We'll see a little bit more cloud cover in the mountains during that day. And if you're planning to be out and about and enjoying all this wonderful warm weather, probably a good idea to take your allergy medicine if you're sensitive to tree pollen, because that is also expected to increase as we get closer to Friday. So we'll continue to see this warm pattern as this high pressure ridge is dominant over the region. However, as we get closer to Thursday, we'll see that ridge start to weaken and continue to move off to the east. Then a low pressure center will dive down from the north off the coast of California, but that puts us under a southwesterly flow, and cooler temperatures will be on the edge of the region as well. So that will bring in more shower and storm chances for us. You can see the chances stay a little bit on the lower side for the Treasure Valley areas. Magic Valley is even drier than the Treasure Valley, and mountains, you can see that is a little bit higher for us. So really pleasant weather for us as we go into tomorrow. Again, lots of sunshine, more of the fair weather clouds are expected, and even warmer temperatures are on the way. But you can see as we look at your 7-day forecast that even warmer temperatures will be on the way as well, getting into the 70s as we get into the weekend.
All right, let's take a look at some of your comments. A couple of you noticed some of our numbers were a little bit incorrect during the library bill story. Like this one, can you check the numbers about the calls, emails to the governor about the library bill? Totals against via email for via phone are identical. That's David in Nampa. Good thing we have Andrew on the line to kind of send us a text message. Yep, Andrew was wrong, Andrew says. Here are the real numbers. Calls against, 2,055. For, 1,241. Emails against, 4,742. Emails for, 2,732. So those are your updated and correct numbers. Not sure what rock you live under, Brian. Science is very clear. There are only two genders. Biological evidence is overwhelming that there are only two genders. I'm about ready to stop watching because of your lack of reporting truth, says Ed and Rupert. Well, sex and gender are not the same thing. Sex, biological. Gender is a social construct. And what about those that are intersex, that have both? So it's not that simple. It's not that cut and dry. Gender and sex, not the same thing. In Idaho, you're absolutely consumed with creating, Idaho, you are absolutely consumed with created fear. Fear, fear, fear. It will render you immobilized and unable to function, says Arnie in Eagle. I have two questions for the library bill. Can just one person in North Idaho get a book moved in the CUNA library, and can a person get a book removed from the adult section? No. No, they can't. You have to be within that district in order to complain about a book to get it moved, and you can't get a book removed from adult section because the point is not having it available to children. That's the whole point. Why can't these legislators work as hard on gun reform as this misguided library bill? Guns are killing our kids, but hey, let's worry about banning books instead. Right, says Jen in Boise. Got a couple of those today. It's going to make thoughts on free in Idaho a little more fearful and ignorant, says Tony from Boise. Any book that you won't read out loud on any of your telecasts should be out of reach of minors at school or in any library, says Randy in Boise. Well, Randy, we won't read Huck Finn on air because of certain words in that, but should that not be allowed to be read by minors? We'll see you tomorrow.